Chuu is not a mini album on constant rotation on my Spotify. I tend to turn to more exciting songs that will help me get through the day with a grin on my face and perhaps even pep in my step. At my absolute lowest, I was still listening to Pyrite by Everglow on repeat. Dum Dum by Somi was on repeat on my way to and from a funeral of a family member gone too soon. Howl is not a mini album that makes me overjoyed, but it is one that makes me feel seen in ways no other piece of music ever has. And I do mean that. Before the music itself was on streaming platforms, we had the Underwater music video, a music video that has made me cry for reasons I've never really shared, certainly not on the internet or with the internet. I think I have to preface this by clarifying that I still have yet to get a diagnosis, an official diagnosis, but I have spoken with professionals over the course of several years who recognize symptoms in me, but it's not until now that I am approaching an old enough age for a proper diagnosis. I'm sort of dancing around the subject more than I want to, though. For years, and even now, I've suspected that I have what is called schizotypal personality disorder, a rare illness that affects most, if not all, parts of one's life, but particularly any social interactions or any interactions in social settings. It's very low on the schizophrenia spectrum, placed there because of any hallucinations and or delusions, but again, low because it's typically easier for people with STPD to recognize their perceptions are not a reality or technically correct, but it makes people feel incredibly uncomfortable or misplaced in social situations, like I said, often leading to isolation from people other than mostly just relatives. Like I said, I do not have an official diagnosis, but in my experience, recognizing these qualities might have a medical explanation has revolutionized the way I think about myself and my own idiosyncrasies. The underwater music video, the first part of the project that was released, truly caught my attention from the very beginning of the video itself because Chuu is seen wearing a very interesting outfit. A common symptom of STPD is dressing oddly, something I've done all my life, from dark colors and layers and intense heat to being told directly by a teacher that she liked my style, but it certainly wasn't considered stylish. I'm not saying she looks bad at all in the video, but she's first seen wearing this outfit that even I recognized as odd, and it made me somewhat emotional. If I remember correctly, we didn't have a way to read the Korean lyrics at first, let alone the English translation, so for a while it was hard to attribute the actual meaning of the song to itself. All I really had to go off of to interpret things was my emotional reaction to the video. There's so many outfits in the video that I genuinely think it's possible this was on purpose, but part of STPD is attributing special personal meanings to things that are actually irrelevant to the truth of the matter. In this music video, though, we see signs of anxiety, a big part of STPD, with her adjusting her headphones multiple times as if to maintain some semblance of control, taking a deep breath to center herself upon walking into a building, and us looking at her from the perspective of the ceiling when she's walking upstairs as if she is experiencing dissociation. The way she sits in bed makes it look like she wants to feel small and separate, and even her shadow doesn't reflect who she is but a character that will come up later. She eventually becomes more comfortable and takes up more space lying on her stomach, but at the same time is occupied with her phone as it takes a lot to stomach the social media world. Shots move back and forth between those straight at her on her phone versus her opening this chest with new clothes for her to don in the middle of an empty beach with no clear direction from actual people on how to react or take on these new belongings. There are also bits going back and forth between her walking in the water, a symbol of life, and taking time on her balcony, a man-made structure attached to the main building, but one for the purpose of decompressing, a place especially intriguing to see the character I feel Chuu plays here. She gets food from a higher shelf. We also see from the perspective of the shelf dissociating her from sustenance which she eats, turned away from a window. It's like the outside world is not a priority, especially as she removes a band-aid to reveal nothing left underneath. Anything the world has done to her does not change her. The mark left is nowhere to be seen, and other people do affect me, but there is a certain disconnect where I've been completely isolated at times in my life, and I didn't process caring as long as I had something to immerse myself in, like a book or like water. Now I'm going to start going out of chronological order for a little bit. Like I said, it took a while for the underwater English translations to be put up. When they were definitely interesting. I think the song has a big focus on contrast even from the beginning. The speaker, who I will refer to as they simply because there are multiple songwriters involved, but the speaker brings up this unfamiliar blue light, and the word this implies a degree of familiarity, but they attest that it is unfamiliar, sort of creating a sense of uncanny from the very beginning, but they also say it spreads in their heart, making me confused if the uncanny is intentional. In this way, it's something familiar made familiar, and I don't think even Freud was prepared to truly analyze all of that. Still, they mention my sea while also addressing it as being afar. They even directly address the dive but say, it pulls me. They unintentionally approach something that it is unclear if they know or understand. There's an emphasis on this motion, sort of like a means of world building. People have told me I'm good at world building before, but it's something I also do in an unintentional way a lot of the time. It's about making decisions, but the important part is getting yourself out of a habit of binary thinking like the speaker is conveying. They portray the state they're in a simile, saying as if they're hypnotized, and magical thinking is a big symptom of STPD, and it's exactly what it sounds like, thoughts and beliefs that just do not make sense to most other people. They take pride in facing feeling, and it is a struggle. I understand my mind in ways that studying can explain what part of the brain does what. There is still so much to study, though, so much that people cannot yet explain, like things ingrained in the bizarre. There's a reason I personally study words. My feelings are normally based on bizarre thoughts, but when I study words, it feels like it's my thoughts being based on creative perception and feeling. And it does feel like understanding and embodying in the way they describe sinking. They portray being as not being, saying no one knows where I am. No one comes first. No one's knowledge comes first. I am comes last. They have intention swimming around, but that is lost as they are dragged around by someone not held culpable or acknowledging any part they have in it. Their action is consistent and distressed, and I am still comes last. They present a metaphor, the maze in their heart, with no purpose, literally saying there is no answer. They also say they are the only one who gets to wander around underwater, which is somewhat puzzling. Why are they the only one? It reminds me of a short story I wrote based on the theater of the absurd, a narrative about someone who has not died but stopped existing in the same plane of reality because they just reject societal standards. It could also be referencing the notion that no one owns the oceans, but they might as well claim ownership as a result of a truly bizarre train of thought. It's a symbol of life, so why not try to own it however they can? It doesn't get less confusing, but I like that. The silence apparently closes their eyes, muddling dimensions while maintaining minimalism. It's not a pattern, though, as they are pitted against a wave, and nature messes with them until they reach their breaking point, no longer having air to breathe. They use passive voice while saying the sea holds their feet, their very foundations, but they convey an interesting question in what makes something complete versus over. The speaker is the opposite of complete, but it would not be unreasonable to assume their story is done. In the pre chorus, we see recurring themes and devices like distance, passive voice, and ending the line with mention of the speaker, but they also bring something new to the table, dialogue. There are no dialogue tags, which lends the listener to a certain level of ambiguity to grapple with, while they bring up a white light at odds with the elusive blue light from the beginning, literally interacting with them in waving. They beckon the listener with repetition and zero apparent grounding in reality. Nearing the end, they reference not knowing where it ends, but we don't even know what it is. They use the word freely in a dependent clause, calling their interpretation of things into question, especially when they talk about heading toward the sky. We have to question the weight of interpretation, their head, for lack of better terms. It's hard to believe they are free from the water. They present literal grounding to step on, but they cannot claim it yet, which is important as they establish a sense of halting time, again making me wonder if they exist in a separate plane of reality. In the end, they say it will fill again underwater, so I don't think there truly is an end or a way out. Return to form is inevitable always. Next, we had the Howl music video, which is not what I expected at all when I saw her Yena-like outfit from pictures of her filming. But I need to express how glad I am she chose this kind of concept, one that fills you with warmth that might not even be present in the literal content of her lyrics or videos. Her voice is so warm to me. Like, tell me listening to Heart Attack doesn't feel like putting on a comfy sweater in the winter. But, once again, I need to point out, she wears a very strange outfit, and it doesn't really match the mood or tone of the video, but they also feel no need to explain why she's dressed like that. She just dresses how she wants, and that makes me so attached to her videos right off the bat. So I'm actually seeing Chuu later this month. I got a ticket. I'm planning on bringing a sign to see if I can get a happy birthday, as that's soon after the date of the concert. But something I saw on Twitter has changed the way I view this video. Chuu said she wants to see people wearing bright colors so she can see their faces. That might not seem important, but the beginning of this video features Chuu in dark clothes. The only bright thing is her band-aid, and we see the white creature's face tilting to the side in the dark. Some people were freaked out by the creature at first, but we obviously learn the fear is unfounded. Still, it says something about our perception of others, how we might need to step out of our typical perspectives to view things in a different manner. That being said, the different manner is not strictly logical. It's the kind of magical thinking that people like myself experience. That is not all this video has to offer, though. We first see Chuu in what I assume is a warehouse on what I assume is a narrow table. It feels important to recognize how this place is a mess. Even the table that she's on is not entirely brushed clear while she sleeps, though we do see her wake up, and I really like this sequence in how it subverts a huge trope in young adult literature. The protagonist waking up, usually in a flurry of motion, to get ready for school because they're going to be late. Chuu is out of focus when she gets up, but she just sits up, face void of emotion when it meets the eye of the person watching. Her monotony is a direct contradiction to the bustling vibrancy we usually see in this specific setup. She's not even blinking much, if at all, as if her eyes don't need it. They don't need moisture, again, symbolic of life. And the fact that we are speaking of her eyes this way also suggests that there is something different about the way she figuratively sees the world. We see her sitting by herself, isolated and not caring much about the physical place she's in. She looks down, eyes flitting more and more as if there is a lot to take in, despite her potentially blunted affect. Looking around, you can see the moisture in her eyes, but the tears do not fall, even as she is clearly uncomfortable and trying to take things in. Her ability to leave surprises her. She opens a door and nothing is the same, even down to her outfit. We see the building from below, suggesting she is part of the grounding of this world and how it is built. Putting on headphones changes everything again, and she finds the new ability to move forward slowly, but she finds the smaller creature who amuses itself and her, even if only through a shop window that separates it from the hand she lays upon the glass. She's able to take off her headphones, and it's like she's accepting her reality might be different from other people's, even the version of her that we've seen previously. Her eyes don't go down, they follow this creature. She's learning how she views the world. She's clearly nervous when looking at a menu, having visually taken the initiative to enter, but the small creature gives her a coin she needs to get a drink that makes her genuinely surprised how happy she feels. When she leaves and sees the white creature again, they're both slightly different from before. She dons a fluffy white hat. It seemingly appears through a portal. Either way, there's something abstract happening that has changed their relationship, something Chuu didn't have to suffer through social interactions to do, whether or not that's a good thing. We see her on a boat ride, enveloped in the world's magic and happy, and it reminds me a lot of going to Disney as a kid. My dog who passed away last year was named after Cali River Rapids. the ride we purposely rode nearly 20 times in a row because we loved it so much. It was everyone's favorite, and my sister recently found videos of us there, me screaming every time I was splashed with any water, but not in a bad way. It's a fond memory, and I have to admit, it feels like more than a coincidence when I know it's not. Chuu is enjoying herself with a bridge in view, and that's pretty obvious symbolism of her bridging different worlds. One of her eyes is obscured from view by the sun, suggesting she has the type of sight she may have lacked previously. On the beach, she sees her new friends, and she's in a white maxi dress and dark boots. Yet again, something I would absolutely wear. And the wind is blowing in her hair, but nothing can stop her from smiling, even though we see a wider shot without the creatures there, begging the question if they're real at all. But maybe that doesn't matter, as we see them when Chuu is crossing the street, absolutely enamored with life and the life she gets to live. Back to the lyrics, the first verse has a very interesting structure, this sort of layering technique combined with catastrophizing. They're very simple about it, though. A dependent clause that offers the notion of catastrophe leads into two simple phrases in one line. Simple in their intention to brush off worry, but also sometimes more simple than what we actually call simple sentences, a single independent clause involving a subject and a predicate. The use of commas to separate these sentiments also contributes to a sense of things being brushed off, unimportant in the grander scheme of things. They acknowledge reality's limitations, such as going out into the social sphere being inevitable, but they also use this as an opportunity to establish a more ideal metaphor, their simile being akin to the signature cape of a superhero. And I'm not caught up in My Hero Academia, do not spoil me, I will cry, but All Might's signature smile is so incredible on a psychological level. He says he wants people to not be afraid, but he's included in that. There was a study where people had to make themselves smile by putting pencils in their mouths, and it made them feel happier. We associate that facial movement with happiness, and it genuinely affects our mood. So when it doesn't make him happy, you know things are fucked. I also relate to the end of the verse because I wrote something incredibly similar. They don't want to be recognized, but they desperately want to be recognized. I wrote a story for my creative nonfiction class where the whole idea was essentially a plea for people to not reference my references, to not get involved in my life, except I wanted them to be involved at the exact same time. That's why I was making the references. Transliteration of feelings and all of that, which brings us to the pre-chorus with lots of repetition. It's so implicit that we know, and they repeat their mantra as well, literally complex in its sentence structure. That's what those kinds of sentences are called, but they also feel in danger on some level because they wouldn't ponder about saving each other otherwise, but they respond with an incomplete sentence in the same manner that the world they describe is elusive. The chorus begins with high tones that take breath, signaling inspiration, and they make a direct address to this wolf. But it takes deliberation if this can count as an apostrophe. The wolf could very well be themselves, and does the wolf count as the other if the wolf is an extension of them? Ending the chorus with another complex sentence alludes to the complex framing of a world where God abandons people. The second verse starts with a simple sentence that is pretty foreboding, but the subject's touch grounds the speaker. There's external dialogue with no tag, which could mean a number of things. I think it seems intimate because the receiver is either so evident no tag is needed or meant to be kept secret. Their internal dialogue poses questions about the difference between identifying and identity. If hearing the speaker signals to go home, we have to question the purpose of these words compared with the previous notion of the sun setting. They refer to the setting with a simile, and saying all we have is wounds once again makes you question if maybe it is the words on the mind that matter. Moving on, eventually we got to the other songs on the mini album, starting with My Palace. These songs, generally speaking, are more literal in terms of the writing. There's pretty clear messaging and less to analyze that most people might miss, but I appreciate them all the same. I think they do tend to mimic the way my mind works, which doesn't happen all the time. Even my writing can be relegated to more typical approaches because I sometimes feel the need to mimic others, so these songs are genuinely very comforting and inspiring. In this song, they immediately and directly address the subject, the stranger, and take a stand, more lilting than brash in their wording, like their ownership of the scenario is a given. They talk about the literal details, and they do it in present tense. They are instead of they were, because they are presenting things, but they also just they're also just living in the context of their own mind. Distance means nothing, maintaining warmth and simplicity despite idiosyncrasies. When they invest themselves in talking about the palace more, though, they start to embody the abstract nature of the place, changing their intention to be open. They beckon people without desperation, just character. And it's interesting when they say the subject will play into their heart versus with their heart, kind of acknowledging people's minds work differently. They're rooted in their own perspective, dismissing thoughts about others. They are enamored and say they made the place in their own image, which could indicate a sort of godly perception, but it's also just confidence. The objects in the house have personality, something I definitely attribute to completely random things. They dress weirdly, their self perception is odd. I just relate so much. Abstraction is in the air, and they seem to consider isolation versus social interaction something very prevalent in the lives of people with STPD. They talk about fairy tales, saying there is a prince on a white horse, so they kind of present things from the top down with the title of the prince being the focus, but they also note specific characteristics of the horse. Horses are animals of prey that can't look at things directly, but they seem to carry some sense of purity. The speaker also doesn't look for fantasy for themselves, asking if other people can just embody it on their own. They talk about imagining versus decorating, the mind versus the physical, not tangible, but part of a world that is their own. And there is an innocence to the way they engage and play with this world. They have strange beliefs, they have magical beliefs, and they lack social understanding, but their beliefs will persist almost no matter what. Next is Aliens. I think this song is one of my favorites sonically, and it is very interesting how it is so simple and achieves so much without having to overextend itself. They don't really understand they are different in the beginning, being more curious about others' behavior than sad. When they talk about themselves and the subject, they are presented as a pair, making me think of Sartre's idea of two people on a bench being hell for the other person, but they are in the same world and actually exposed to another hell. Still, they are rather aimless in their commentary, establishing a sense of familiarity but not uncanny. They make it clear they don't think the other is bad, preserving innocence and objectivity. They use language like story, psychic, and superpower thing, playing into the magic they embody. They also talk about color and temperature of blood, not really topics we bring up very often. They talk about if body parts were in different locations entirely, and it might not be important functionally, but there are different connotations associated with locations, such as the head being at the highest part of the body. When they talk about things being a bit different, it's like a mantra. The beauty of it all takes everything into context, and they reference being unpredictable or inexplicable, like others' abilities do not hold a candle to them, yet there's also a mention of falling, and we have to ask if we cannot be grounded and still appreciate beauty. Finally, we've gotten to Hitchhiker, which has a music video, but I do not plan to reference it because of the AI generated art that I don't want to include in my video. Instead, we will just talk about the lyrics, which are interesting on their own, to be fair. There is an immediate sense of uncertainty. They crash land somewhere before the listener can really find any footing. The way they look at the world is uncanny. The familiar is unfamiliar, but there's also a certain innocence, especially speaking of meeting a friend versus making one. The galaxy has thoughts, and those thoughts are magical thinking the speaker assumes everyone must have. They continue to be tender and see personality in non-living things, but there's also a level of grounding even in the familiar. They can center themselves and still not understand things, but they can still appreciate it in a strange way. They remain secluded, but they almost seem more susceptible to the awareness of things like atmosphere. Singing the word earth, especially highlighting the E, you have to wonder if they are doomed from the beginning of the very word. The second verse is a straight up mantra. I even relate personally to the pre-chorus because I'm a singer and I repeatedly black out when I'm singing very specific parts of whatever song, but my mind is magical and I probably could hold hands with anywhere and anyone, but in this instance I do mean anywhere. There is no home. There is simplicity, and I find that I like my brain a lot of the time. They talk about eyes wide open, suggesting an actual lack of sight even as it is engraved in their heart. They have trouble understanding things, but I like understanding things to the extent that I can. My mind allows new types of growth and arcs and opportunities for chaos, and the speaker's breath again signals inspiration, as my mind is beautiful too. It's hard to talk about, but I feel like I have to at some point. No one talks about personality disorders, or they talk about the most dramatic cases. I'm just not normal. I'm not extremely abnormal, but I have extreme trouble trying to navigate social structures and traditions not made for people like me. I have an extremely small social circle, essentially none if I'm being honest, at least in real life. My sister's friend was very proud of me when I made a K-pop club at my school, and even that, when I was president, was not a healthy thing for me. I experienced so much anxiety while also dealing with very serious memory problems. What I'm trying to say is it's rare for me to feel like I measure up to those around me, and it's genuinely very comforting when people might not even subscribe but just watch, maybe leave a comment. I've been told having STPD would mean I'm hopeless, but I have started finding hope in places I didn't expect, and I have to thank the people I've met in this community for that. People talk about KTube being a terrible place, but I really value other people valuing what I have to say, even if it will inevitably come off strange to some. I'm just very thankful for everyone. There have been years, and I mean years, where I had essentially no one. It makes me happy that I can be myself and still appeal to those who think differently, so thank you. Thank you so much.